Book Stew viewers and listeners. I have a really exciting book to talk to you about today, and an author with an interesting background, I think. And if you look over her shoulder, you can see the book. It's called Riot Act. And welcome, Sarah Larviere. And welcome to Book Stew. And you're one of my first YA authors. But we talked a little bit about writing for YA versus writing for a general audience. And I had asked you if you had deliberately aimed the book at YA, at a YA audience. So can you tell us a little bit about your aim when you wrote the book and who you were hoping would read the book?
Sure. First, thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here. Really thrilled to get to talk about Riot Act with you. I wrote the book explicitly. It's a YA book, but as I was writing, I was really writing it kind of for my teenage self. And I hoped that my peers would read it as well, adults. And like we talked about earlier, there are a few notes you need to hit in YA for it to sort of fit into the genre. You need to sort of have some kind of a love story typically, and you need to sort of have characters who are coming to some realization about themselves that's fairly explicit usually. And in this case, I've written sort of a thriller, so it needs to be a bit of a page turner. But other than hitting those notes and being mindful of kind of content limitations for a young adult audience, it's an adult book in a YA wrapper, essentially, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's a great way to put it. The cover just attracted me immediately when I received my copy of it. It's very punk rock, and I think the title is an amalgamation of Riot girls who were, girls who were musicians, including like Pussy Riot and groups like that, and ACT. And the book is really a theater kid book. Were you a theater kid?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, theater really gave me a way of expressing big emotions at that age when I was a teenager. When I sort of stumbled into the world of theater, I discovered that there was a place where big feelings were not only acceptable, they were celebrated. And to be able to express through your body and your voice these big feelings, and talk about big themes, adult themes. It was such a gift to find that art form where it was really, you were celebrated for your ability to access those emotions.
And I think being a theater kid opens up worlds to you that maybe people who grow up in cities already are used to the way life works, that there are people who are reading and writing poetry. And in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, the theater kids were probably, they were like a posse unto themselves. And most theater kids happily have a wonderful leader, a teacher who is like completely simpatico with them. And theater kids take in, people who like to build sets, people who like to perform, people who like to do costuming and hair and makeup. And I think your portrayal of the thespians, who is the group here, is very warm and embracing of all types of kids. Was your theater group like that?
Yeah, very much so. We had a fantastic director named Keith Page. He was a beloved local weatherman as well as the high school theater teacher. And he built or renovated the theater at our high school a long time before I arrived. It was a gorgeous space. And the kids who were attracted to the theater, the way he ran the program, it was very the expectations were high. So if you were a misfit who kind of stumbled in, you were tasked with an enormous amount of responsibility. We built sets on the weekends, rehearsals went late into the night sometimes. And if you were late, you didn't get to come into rehearsal. You had to be on time, and on time means early in the theater. So we learned so much, but it bonded us together with a mission that was very meaningful to everyone. And it was an experience of collaboration. I think all theater kids, techies and actors get this experience of working together as a group that it becomes a family. Every play is a family.
I think it's that people who do athletics in high school probably have the same group mentality, but I think theater, you don't have to be physically skilled in order to do it. You just have to have a desire and a heart. And so I think that the kids end up being a team, like a basketball team is a team, those same type of feelings. So that's the positive and wonderful part. But let's talk about the dark part, which is that, and especially in light of the election that happened last Tuesday, this part is very important, and it's the fact that things are different in the country. And can you tell us what happened? And this is the interesting part, is you said it in 1991. So it's not a dystopian thing like in the year 2025. It's you look back, you place the date backwards instead, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's an American autocracy. It's set in 1991. And what happens in the book is America elects sort of a self-help guru to be the president. He's someone who has sort of a cult of the dollar, get rich quick set of cassette tapes he's been hawking on late night television throughout the early 80s. And he is elected president. And then after 2 terms, he decides he'll just stay president. So in 1988, he becomes the dictator of America. And he very quickly implements censorship in a very brutal and wide-ranging form, and very, very similar to regimes around the world in the past and the present who have an autocrat in charge. Self-expression is really illegal. And this is the world the kids have grown up in, and this is what they're dealing with now, is they'd like to make theater, but it is, most plays are illegal to perform. And I said it in the past, in part because I was in high school in the late 80s and early 90s, and later in my life, I became very interested in Eastern Europe, and I lived in Budapest in Hungary in the mid-90s. And that's a place where, during the years of the Iron Curtain, artists were dealing with censorship and having to work around it and subvert, risk their lives to express themselves. So I was curious, well, what if I had been a teenager in, East Berlin or Budapest or Czechoslovakia? How would I have dealt with those restrictions? And so, as sort of a thought experiment, when I was conceptualizing the book, I thought, well, let's play with that. Let's set this book in the time when I was a teenager, in the place where I grew up, and give these theater kids those types of restrictions and see what they do with it, how hard they'll fight for their rights.
It was, they also have a fearless leader and a great director like you had. And her ability to work with the kids is severely compromised because she's really considered basically an enemy of the state. But now I'd like to get into your choice of the play that they're doing. So it's Henry VI, Part One, which has a lot of moving parts. It has the War of the Roses. It has Joan of Arc, and I love the fact that each chapter heading is a quote from the play. So I thought that was really well done. What made you choose that play?
It was sort of a sort of a stroke of luck in a way. I'm not a Shakespeare expert or a Shakespeare scholar, but I wanted to find a play that was difficult, a Shakespeare that was difficult and that was not frequently performed, that isn't frequently performed, something that would be very cumbersome. And as I started, and the reason for that is the theater teacher, I kind of had the sense she was getting frustrated with the kids somehow. And maybe she herself was getting a little more frenetic in her decision making. And so she sort of decides, okay, we're going to choose a really complicated play. As I was researching potential plays, I realized that Henry VI is about leaders who are fighting for power. It descends into civil war. But the leaders aren't the ones who are out on the battlefield. They're sending average, people out to go and die on their behalf. So I thought, okay, we're on the brink of civil war. We have fabulous female characters with Joan of Arc and Queen Margaret and Eleanor. I wanted fabulous female characters. And so the more I dug in, the more I realized this play isn't only cumbersome and difficult to produce, it's actually spot on for what's happening to the kids in the world of the book.
And the characters, there are three. There's the teacher, Ms. Lee, and then there are three kids who are the characters. There's Maxie, Axel, and Gigi. Max is dead. We are seeing things mostly through his eyes, but he's in an area, and I wanted to get the exact right word as you described it. He calls it purgatorio. So he is the main narrator. Can you tell us about your decision to make your main character not alive?
Yeah, this is one of those moments as a writer where you sort of surrender to the mystery of the process. I had a concept for this book about teenagers in an autocratic 1991. And when I actually sat down to write it, Max just showed up and he started talking. And as I was typing, I realized quickly he was dead. And he just was off and running to tell me the story. It was almost like he had been waiting for someone to show up and tell his story. So it was a mysterious thing, but Max really led the way on that.
All right. Well, if we'd love you to do a brief reading that includes Maxie in it, and if you can do a little setup before, that would be great, so we know where Maxie's at this point.
Sure. So at this point in the book, so Max is dead. Max has been murdered by the police state. And this section of the story is a flashback where Max is speaking with his father. His father is a commissioner in the party of the dictator's party, which is called the System. His father is a high up in the party, and he's responsible for implementing some of the dictator's orders on a local level in Champaign-Urbana. So that's where we are now, this flashback between Max talking with his father. So we start with a line of dialogue from Max. "Dad, what's your job exactly?" Dad tilted his head, looking puzzled. "Why, I've been buying and selling real estate in every major metropolitan city in the Midwest since I was 19 years old." No, I mean in the party. Specifically, like, what do you do with the neighborhood reports? Dad put his free hand into the pocket of his slacks, rocked onto his toes. The fragrance of lasagna filled the house, making it feel safe as anywhere ever was or could possibly be. These days, not much. What's that mean? Dad exhaled forcibly, like there was something heavy inside him that he was trying to lift up and launch out. Maximus, you're a man now. I nodded with actorly confidence. A man I be. Things seemed to have shifted in the party, slid inch by inch over the past, say, 2 to 3 years. As in, the new American way was supposed to be about encouraging citizens to take charge of their destinies, removing roadblocks, letting people thrive, take responsibility for themselves in a colorblind society, setting them free and watching them run. This is how America was born. I resisted the urge to make some clarifying statements about genocide, slavery, imperialism, and the delusions of the patriarchy. I wanted to hear what Dad was trying to tell me, not lock into the same old argument. People working their fingers to the bone to make something out of nothing. I'll have you know, Max, that I believe in that even still, the beauty of hard work and individual responsibility. The pause was long, getting longer, feeling final. I said, but some party members here in Champaign County, and also, Chicago, Wisconsin, Minnesota, forget Indiana, Arkansas, swaths of the South, the obscure North, the Dakotas, Florida, and the Northeast is no bastion of clear thought either. Even California wavers. Dad stopped talking again and looked at Mom, raised his glass, took a long gulp of wine. I felt like he was a car stalling. We needed to turn the keys, start him back up. I said, some party members are? Son, I voiced my concerns, feedbacked, made calls, wrote letters, knocked on doors. My complaints have gone largely ignored. Now, as I see it, a large part of my role as community commissioner is simply to prevent problems. What kind of problems? I asked. If I'm the adult in the room, people who haven't heard a flea don't have to deal with the hassle of being investigated, I asked. I told them, Max, that in my opinion, the party's crackdown on anti-American thought has become a distraction from our mission of economic empowerment. In fact, I believe it's borderline harassment. The party, inadvertently, mind you, encourages yucksters and thugs to slap American flags on their vehicles and go around threatening people. Bullies, Max, nosy Nellies with scores to settle, anointing themselves party protectors. Dad pointed at my chest with his glass. Now this is between us men and Mom. I nodded, willing him to keep talking about nosy Nellies like forever. A person must develop a philosophy to succeed in life. That's not an original idea. It's a system core value. But I had a philosophy before Bud Hill, and when a person sees wrongness, they must act. Don't gloat. I shook my head. I would not have dared interrupt my father at that moment to gloat. Unfortunately, when some people see an opportunity to get what they want most, they'll do so with a surprising lack of ethical, ethics. What do people want most? You know the answer to that. I wasn't sure I did, but he was just staring at me. So I said, what people want most, which is, Mom said, power. I had the sensation that the bulls were standing together in the hall of justice, and that my parents were sharing a truth so profound as to be self-evident. That's when I had the vision. My father was an elderly man reclining in his leather chaise lounge, reading an architectural magazine. Mom's hair was totally white and she was tucking his blanket over his knees. My boyfriend and I were in the kitchen cooking Sunday dinner. I saw it, Gigi, so clearly. My family loved each other more than anything in the world. The Bowles were going to be okay. You and I disagree about the fundamentals, Max. I do not believe government should distribute handouts at the taxpayer's expense. Free money is an insult, a disincentive to thrive. He stalled. This time, Mom started him again. But darn it, our forefathers died for the country called the United States of America, not for some numbskulls who wouldn't know a human right if they ran into one in a dark alley. That's where human rights hung out now, wasn't it? Dark alleys. I'd like to believe we're heading toward a détente of sorts. The easing of relations between the party and the citizens is inevitable, said Dad. We're one country. Nobody wants civil war. Civil war? Asked Mom. Who's talking about that? We keep our heads down, guys. Make no enemies. Wait it out. We'll all be absolutely fine.
Oh, how appropriate is that? Is that part that I picked out to ask you to read? The fears expressed are very, very current, and I wanted to know if you had any thoughts about that after we saw the election results.
Yeah, I think that right now, what interests me most is the narrative that somehow we should be fighting against one another, and that this is such a divided country that, half of us should think the other half aren't human. I think that this dehumanization is really the great ill of this moment. This moment for our country. I think my focus is on seeing behind these masks that we wear of our political affiliations. And I think that's the way forward. So in this scene, Max and his dad, who have polar opposite political views, are connecting on their common ground of caring about humanity and being loving people. And I think that's our way forward as well.
I think the love expressed all throughout the book between the thespians, between Max and his family, the theater teacher is very strongly and beautifully expressed, and you did a wonderful job with that. Now, this is a duology, which I had never heard that used. So this is going to be a 2-book series. Can you tell us a little bit about the next book coming up?
Yes, I'm so excited because I'm actually turning it in tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. I'm turning it in tomorrow. The next book is really a response to the first book. So in the second book, the thespians are left with additional tragedy, more death, and we have a shift in the narrator. We have a new narrator for the second book. And we are dealing with trauma and grief, and how do we move forward in the face of loss. We also have the thespians took some risks in book 1, and in book 2, they'll have to live with the consequences of the risks that they took and question whether they did the right thing. So it's a real examination of how we respond in situations like this, and an examination of how we live with grief and loss.
Well, I hope that you'll stay in touch so that I can have you back on the show for the second book. I know it'll be at least a year and a half, but I just can't wait to see what happens with these kids. I have one more question for you, and this has to do with your first novel, which was nominated for an Edgar Award. I have another author who appears quite frequently who has been nominated for 3 Edgar Awards. What was that like when you found out about that? Because it's really a very high honor, the Mystery Writers of America, to choose your novel.
Yeah, that was so exciting. My literary agent texted me, and I was just stunned. It was my first book, and I love a party, and they I had heard it was a great party. The invitation to the ceremony said "dress to kill," which feels like an appropriate guideline for a mystery book party. So it was really exciting, and it was also great just to meet other authors who were that was a middle grade book that was nominated. So it was great to meet my fellow nominees and spend a few days in New York just getting to know them. It was really cool.
Well, it's been really cool talking to you, and you are a very cool author. Sarah, I can't wait to speak with you again. And now this book is also available in audio, which I think even though I read it, I would love to listen to it. And because just listening to you read, you're actually a good reader. That was really brought. I'm glad I picked out that section, and you did a great job with it. So thanks so much for being on Book Stew, and we'll look forward to having you back again.
It's been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Okay, viewers and listeners, please pick up Riot Act with its really fantastic artwork and cover. I love it. And let's hope the next few years we will be able to get through and survive. Have a good night.